In the swirling snow, a little girl stood trembling, facing the wall, clutching an empty lunchbox. When the lonely homeless man gently asked why, she whispered, "I can't come until I bring dinner." His heart broke, and what he did next would change her fate forever. The snowstorm had arrived early in Portland, Maine, sweeping through the city in heavy, swirling sheets that blurred the neon of storefronts and coated the world in a relentless white hush. Arthur should have been hunkered down in his usual spot, the sheltered alcove behind the old theater. But the gnawing hunger was worse than the cold tonight, so he'd been cutting down the side street behind Lambert's grocery, hoping for discarded produce. The air was sharp, each breath biting, and the only sound was the scuff of his worn-out boots against ice and the distant, muffled honk of a harbor taxi somewhere on the frozen water. He nearly missed her. She was so small and so still she blended into the brick and shadow. A little girl, maybe 6, standing alone by the wall in a tattered pink dress that fluttered uselessly in the wind. Her bare feet were planted on blackened slush, toes curled, skin blotched red and raw. She didn't turn or move, not even as snow clung to her tangled hair, and a faint shiver ran through her tiny body. She just stood there, pressed close to the cold brick, her face inches from the wall. At first, Arthur thought she was in trouble, maybe hiding from someone, or perhaps just lost and waiting for help. But as he stepped closer, her body tensed all at once like a spooked animal, shoulders jumping so hard he stopped in his tracks. The look she gave him over one shoulder was not just wary, but haunted. Her eyes were wide and glassy, her mouth pinched tight, as if every sound or motion could bring danger. He crouched down, his own joints aching from the cold, careful to make his voice gentle. "Hey there, little one. Are you okay? Are you hurt?" She winced at the question, then slowly shook her head. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she whispered, "I can't come until I bring dinner." Her lips were turning blue, and her fingers, he saw now, were stiff and cracked, clutching an old plastic lunchbox to her chest as if it were armor. The unicorn sticker on the lid was faded and split. The corners were patched in peeling tape. Arthur's gaze darted from her to the loading door of the market, but there was no sign of anyone else. No grown-up, no friend, no familiar face watching out for her. "Who told you that?" he asked quietly. "My aunt," the girl said. "She says if I don't bring something home, I wait out here. So, I get better at it." Arthur's jaw tightened. He glanced down the alley, suddenly aware of how alone she truly was and how little stood between her and the storm. "What's your name?" he said. She hesitated, eyes flicking from his face to his worn boots and back again. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily," he repeated and knelt beside her in the slush, not caring about the wet soaking into his thin trousers. "Can I help you? Can I take you somewhere warm?" Lily shook her head, but not with conviction. More like she'd learned to say no as a reflex. "She says I have to stay. I'm not supposed to leave till she says." Arthur watched her shiver, watched her try to look brave, try to disappear inside herself. He recognized that look. He'd worn it himself for years. It was the look of someone invisible, used to the world passing by without stopping, without noticing the fear or the pain. Her lunchbox was empty. She opened it for him, almost as if she was ashamed. "I didn't steal anything," she whispered. "It's just empty." His heart lurched. Without a second thought, he shrugged off his heavy, threadbare coat, his only real protection from the winter, and wrapped it gently around her small shoulders, tucking it in under her chin. For a moment, she went stiff as if expecting a blow, but then she sagged into the warmth with a sigh so small it nearly broke him. Snow dusted her lashes. The wind pulled at the hem of her dress. Arthur looked at her, at the cracked lunchbox and her raw feet, and the way her voice had sounded when she said, "Bring dinner." He glanced again at the silent windows above the grocery and felt a cold, ancient anger burning behind his ribs. He couldn't walk away. He didn't even consider it. The memory of his own daughter, Maya, flashed through his mind, her face thin and hopeful in a hospital bed. The last time he saw her, right before the world took her from him. Lily glanced up at him, uncertain, as if waiting for the world to snap back into cruelty. But Arthur stayed. He knelt in the snow and wrapped his arms gently around her, sheltering her from the wind. "You're not alone anymore," he said, his voice trembling with a conviction he hadn't felt in years. Not tonight. As the city vanished behind thick veils of snow, Arthur knew this was the moment everything changed. He chose to stay, and he would not let her stand alone against the wall ever again. The storm grew meaner through the night, slapping the city with fists of snow. Arthur barely felt the cold as he stood outside the battered apartment door, his own coat still wrapped around Lily, who walked beside him with careful, silent steps. The walk up the exterior staircase had been slow, Lily wincing with each barefooted touch on the splintered wood. He wanted to carry her, but she pulled away, too used to doing things herself. He knocked. The hallway inside was a tunnel of peeling wallpaper and old smells, cooking oil, cigarettes, the faint trace of mildew. After a few moments, the door swung open. A woman Arthur guessed was in her mid-40s stared out at them. She was a narrow, sharp-edged woman with restless hands and thin lips pressed tight around a cigarette. She looked Arthur up and down with open disdain, then at Lily, and something like annoyance flickered across her face. "What the hell's this?" she demanded, voice gravelly. Before Arthur could answer, Lily shrank behind him, eyes to the floor. Arthur forced his voice to be calm. "Evening, ma'am. I found your niece outside in the snow. She was barefoot. She said she couldn't come in until she brought dinner." The woman's expression shifted instantly, a practiced indignation sliding into place. "She's always making up stories," she said with a dismissive wave. "The girl's got a wild imagination. Trouble from the day she showed up." "She was shivering, ma'am," Arthur said quietly. "Her lips were blue." "That's not a story." "Look, I work long hours," the woman huffed. "Sometimes she forgets the rules. She's got to learn responsibility. If you cuddle her, she'll never toughen up. This is a hard world." Arthur studied her, cataloging every detail. The stale smoke in the air, the sink full of dishes behind her shoulder. He wanted to argue, but Lily pressed tighter against his leg, and it was clear this was not a home where arguments were won with words. "We don't need charity from the likes of you," she bristled, eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't be poking around in other people's family business. She'll be fine. She always is." Arthur knelt down to meet Lily's gaze, but she wouldn't look at him. Her hand crept into the pocket of his coat, the one she was still wearing. Without a word, she pressed a folded piece of paper into his palm. Her fingers were shaking. Arthur stood and nodded to the woman, his patience threadbare. He waited, but she just snorted and slammed the door. The deadbolt clicked. In the corridor, under the sickly yellow light, Arthur unfolded the paper. It was a child's crayon drawing, rough, urgent lines, a black box thick with shadow, and inside it a small figure crouched alone. There was a big red X on the door, and a padlock drawn with heavy, angry marks. Arthur's hands trembled. That image, a child locked in darkness, burrowed deep, pulling up memories he'd spent years trying to forget. His daughter Maya, tiny and brave, passed from one sterile hospital room to another until the world simply swallowed her up. He had been too late to save her. He'd promised himself he would never be too late again. That night, Arthur returned to his alcove, but the thin blanket didn't comfort him. The city below glowed behind frosted glass, but every light seemed dimmer. He spread Lily's crayon drawing on the cold concrete beside his meager belongings. He tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily barefoot in the snow, and her aunt's face, all sharp corners and indifference. By midnight, he rose. He walked to the kitchen of a 24-hour diner, picked up the drawing, and stared at it until resolve replaced the ache in his chest. He would go back. He didn't have a plan, just a promise. Lily Carter wouldn't be left in the cold again. Not if he had anything to say about it. And this time, he would not look away. The next morning, the city woke to a world changed by snow. Arthur arrived early, moving with purpose. He'd used the few dollars he'd panhandled to buy a carton of milk, a small box of cereal, and a pair of thick wool socks from the thrift store. He hesitated outside the building, gathering the resolve to climb the stairs. When he knocked, there was no answer. He knocked again, louder this time. After a pause, the door cracked open just a sliver. Lily's face appeared in the gap, weary and tired. She was alone. He knelt so they were level. "Morning, Lily," he said softly. "I brought breakfast." He held up the small bag. "Is your aunt home?" Lily shook her head. "She left early." She opened the door a bit more, letting him see the cramped, cold apartment. The kitchen window was cracked, letting in icy air. Arthur entered carefully, setting the food on the coffee table. Lily hovered by the doorway, uncertain. "It's okay," he said, smiling gently. "I promise." He unwrapped the socks and slipped them gently over her frozen toes. Her feet were so small and his hands, red and bruised. He poured the milk and cereal into a chipped bowl. She ate slowly, chewing each bite as if she expected it to be taken away. After breakfast, Arthur asked, "Can you show me your room, Lily?" She hesitated, then nodded and led him to a closet just off the living room. The door was heavy, the paint chipped. The space inside was barely big enough for a child to stand up in. There was a stained mat on the floor, a battered plastic bucket, and a single threadbare blanket. "She puts me in here when I'm bad," Lily whispered. "Sometimes at night. Sometimes, if I'm quiet, the dark is nicer." Arthur felt his breath catch. "You shouldn't ever have to be in here," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Would you come with me? Just for a little while? There's a clinic down the street. A doctor can make sure you're healthy. You can bring your lunchbox if you want." Lily hesitated. "Will my aunt be mad?" Arthur shook his head. "I'll handle it. You did nothing wrong. This isn't your fault." She hugged her lunchbox tighter, but then, as if some invisible wall had finally crumbled, she nodded. They moved through the city, snow falling in thick, fat flakes. The pediatric wing of the free clinic was warm and bright. Arthur watched from a corner chair as Dr. Anya Sharma moved gently through the exam. Lily perched on the edge of the paper-draped bed, Arthur's coat pulled around her like a lifeline. She didn't cry or complain, not even when Dr. Sharma found bruises along her arms and thin red welts circling her ankles. She answered every question quietly, flinching only when asked about meals or bedtime. When the exam finished, Dr. Sharma returned with another woman, a sturdy, no-nonsense social worker named Ms. Davies. Ms. Davies introduced herself to Lily, kneeling to the child's level, offering a coloring book. She then pulled Arthur aside. "The law is clear," she said. "With the injuries documented and Lily's statements, we have reasonable cause for emergency intervention. But the system isn't always kind. You did the right thing." As they spoke, raised voices echoed from the lobby. Lily's aunt stormed into the ward. "Where is she? Where's my niece?" She spotted Arthur and barreled toward him. "You! Who do you think you are, you filthy bum? You have no right." Ms. Davies stepped calmly between them, flashing her badge. "Ma'am, I'm with the state's child welfare office. Lily is under our protection now. You will not take her anywhere until a formal investigation is complete." The woman's mask slipped. "You'll regret meddling," she hissed at Arthur. He stood his ground, unblinking. Someone had to. Once the hallway cleared, Ms. Davies led Arthur back to the exam room. Lily was coloring, hunched over a drawing of a door, a big yellow star, and a tiny stick figure holding a lunchbox. "Lily," Ms. Davies said gently. "Would you like to stay somewhere warm tonight? Somewhere safe?" Lily's eyes darted to Arthur. She nodded ever so slightly. "Can I have a nightlight?" she asked so softly Arthur almost missed it. He felt his heart ache. "You can have as many nightlights as you want," he promised. That night, Lily was placed in emergency foster care. Arthur couldn't be her guardian, he had no home, no resources. The feeling of helplessness was crushing. He sat in his cold alcove, the silence screaming at him. He had found her, but the system had taken her. He remembered Maya's last words, her hand cold in his. "Don't let other kids get lost, Daddy." He had failed her once. He wouldn't fail Lily. The next day, Arthur walked into the legal aid office, his hands shaking. He met a young, determined lawyer named Sarah Jenkins. He told her everything, showing her Lily's drawing. Sarah listened, her eyes filled with a fire Arthur hadn't seen in years. "This is a fight," she said, "but I don't lose these fights." The following days were a storm of affidavits and worry. Sarah filed for a hearing. Ms. Davies wrote a passionate letter to the judge. Dr. Sharma submitted her medical reports. All the while, Arthur could only visit Lily for an hour a day at the foster home. "They don't have you," she'd whisper, gripping his hand. "Or anyone who stays." "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. "Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever." The courthouse stood silent beneath a sky the color of dirty snow. Arthur arrived with Sarah at his side. He wore a clean shirt and jacket borrowed from a shelter. Lily sat with Ms. Davies, clutching a small stuffed owl. The judge, Evelyn Harris, was a woman in her 60s, tired-eyed but kind. Ms. Davies and Dr. Sharma testified first, their words painting a grim, undeniable picture of neglect and abuse. Then Sarah called Arthur to the stand. He spoke quietly, recounting the day he'd found Lily shivering against the wall. "She didn't ask for anything," Arthur said, his voice trembling. "She only wanted to know if someone would stay." Finally, the judge asked Lily if she wanted to speak. She approached the podium, her owl clutched in one arm, her lunchbox in the other. "She said if I didn't bring food, I'd sleep standing up in the dark," Lily whispered. "I tried really hard to be good, but the dark doesn't go away. Mr. Arthur let me sleep with a light on. He never made me stand in the closet. He never yelled." There was a long, aching pause as the judge studied her. "Thank you, Lily," Judge Harris said softly. "You're very brave." She turned over a stack of papers, her voice suddenly decisive. "This court finds overwhelming evidence of abuse and neglect. The aunt is permanently stripped of all guardianship rights." 2 deputies escorted the woman from the courtroom. Judge Harris continued, her voice gentler. "Mr. Arthur, it is the opinion of this court that Lily's best chance for healing is with the person who first saw her and chose not to walk away. The state will work with you to secure immediate housing and support services. Pending review, you are awarded temporary guardianship of Lily Carter." The words echoed in Arthur's chest, a mixture of relief and fierce gratitude so sharp it brought tears to his eyes. As they left the courtroom, the air outside was lighter. Lily clung to Arthur, her grip never loosening. When he crouched beside her, she looked up and whispered, "Can we go home now?" Arthur smiled, the first real smile he'd felt in years. "Yes, Lily. We can go home." With help from Ms. Davies and a local housing program, they moved into a small, clean apartment. It wasn't a penthouse, but it was a sanctuary. The walls were soon covered in Lily's crooked, bold drawings of houses with open doors and stars spilling from closets. Every night, a lamp shaped like a crescent moon glowed warm and steady on her dresser. One afternoon, they walked to the old alley behind Lambert's grocery. This time, Lily wore her new boots and a warm coat. Together, they painted a mural on the cold brick wall, a wide open door, a path of stars leading out, and a girl in a pink dress with her face turned to the sun. Beneath it, she painted their initials, L, C and A, and in gold, the words, "For those who bring the light." Months later, they stood in the same courtroom. Judge Harris smiled. Lily Carter, she said, voice warm. From this day forward, Arthur is not just your guardian, but your father. This is forever. Lily threw her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder. I don't have to be brave every day now, she whispered. Because I'm home. That night, as the city lights flickered, Arthur tucked her in. Will you stay? She asked, her voice soft. Even when I'm asleep? Arthur kissed her forehead. Even when you dream, I'll be right here. He paused at her door, watching the moon lamp cast its gentle glow over her peaceful face. For the first time in years, he felt not just relief, but contentment. In the morning, sunlight would find the mural in the alley. And anyone who walked by would see what love and courage can do. Not erase the past, but rewrite it with hope. Lily was home. The dark had lost, and neither of them would ever stand against the wall alone again.